Working. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're here for another Dyslexia Success Stories. I'm Dr. Tim Conway. I'm dyslexic, but I got early intervention at age 5, like prevention. And I'm here with Santi, and Santi came to the Morris Center Clinic back in 2013, some 11 years ago, Santi. And we're just going to have an informal discussion about bilingual dyslexia because you had been tested by a psychologist in Mexico, and they found that you were dyslexic in Spanish. And then you began, working bilingual skills and learning English as well. And you came to the Morris Center, and we tested your English skills, and you were also dyslexic in English. And there's the big question about, okay, what do you do? I mean, how do you help a kid if they're dyslexic in 2 languages? It's tough enough if they're dyslexic in 1, but how about 2? And it'll be a fun discussion as we talk about the brain and language, and I'll share some neuropsychology along with your personal experiences. But welcome to the show, Dyslexia Success Stories, and thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
So let's start just with your memories, Santi. I know it's been some 11 years. We've not really chatted much since then. I've seen a few posts on Facebook. Your mom and I chat from time to time. I saw that you graduated from high school, and we'll go back and get to that point later on. But tell me, what do you remember about struggles in school before we actually worked on empowering your reading skills at the Morris Center?
Well, I think the main thing I remember is fear. I remember being very scared every time a teacher would ask me to read something in public, or every time I had homework that involved a lot of reading, or maybe even speaking in public, because I used to get a lot of really tongue-tied every time I talked in public. And I used to get confused with words. I used to get a lot of confusion, no, and that gave me a lot of fear. So
Okay.
I think that would be like my main memory from school when I was younger. Fear.
Understandable. And how did the fear relate to just your ability to read and to spell? Was that part of the fear, or was that separate from the fear?
That was the main part of the fear. I used to start reading, and I would start reading at a very slow pace because my reading skills were not that good. So
Mhm.
I would start reading really, really slow, and then I would get stuck in some words, and I would get really stuck, and my head would go crazy. I wouldn't even know what I was thinking about. And I was combining dyslexia with my own anxiety to read.
Mhm.
So it was a very, very tough combination of things, of feelings, and it would be something that would happen quite often. Um, Teachers wouldn't really understand my situation.
Mhm.
They thought the best way to help me was to make me read more in public, or let me leave me more homeworks involving reading. And well, that wasn't the solution, right?
Right. And take us back, and what's your first or earliest remembrance of school struggles? Was it, age 7? Was it age 9? Was it, because you were already, I believe, about 14 by the time you got to the Morris Center. So you'd had many years of schooling. Do you remember when you first realized this isn't going well? My friends are reading and I'm not reading quite as well.
I have a very clear memory of the first time I discovered this, right? I believe, years old. I was in my first year in school, and I started writing. I was writing a sentence. When I went to give it to the teacher, my sentence was written like around. It was some the teacher couldn't understand how I did that. I
Okay.
don't understand how I did. And then the teachers testing us reading, and all of this fear started right there. So the teacher, I had to go with the school psychologist, and that she had to get me tested.
Right.
Something right with me.
And we're having a little bit of
So
choppy
I went to get
bandwidth,
tested, and
Santi.
I
Sorry.
think,
Tell me one more time. The
sorry?
age was around age 7 when you first remembered. We're losing a little bit of audio because we're probably talking so
Yes.
fast the bandwidth can't keep up with us. But was age 7?
Yeah, it was age 7 that I
Okay.
first noticed.
And the flipping you described
And I
was,
believe I was diagnosed.
and I have records. We know you were diagnosed in Spain, or sorry, in Spanish first. And the flipping you were talking about, it was it actually writing backwards, or was it actually mixing the words up?
I was writing backwards.
Okay.
Yeah,
And like you said, equally confusing to you and the teacher.
yes. Yeah, at the end I didn't know how I wrote that. I wasn't sure because I didn't do it consciously. I did it
Mhm.
like I just wrote it like that.
Right. And how about with reading? What was it like for you? What you remember, your earliest remembrance of reading that you said gave you that anxiety and that fear?
I believe it should have been right around the same time, and it wasn't a very good experience because I started reading and I started getting stuck, and well, by then my reading skills were pretty much zero.
Hmm.
I had a lot of trouble reading. I had a lot of trouble putting words together. I would switch words every single time. Uh, yeah, it wasn't a good experience. It was hard, really hard.
And to put some numbers to your experience, I'm just going to put a really big, busy graph up on the screen real quick and just explain to the, viewers, people who are watching this now or later, that this scores down here on the bottom of this graph, on the bottom left, shows that most all of your reading skills were below the first percentile. So you're very correct. And remember, when we did this testing, this is 2013, you're already 14 years old here. And so at age 14, your reading
Yes.
skills were still around the first percentile, which means extremely difficult to read, really very little, if any, functional reading skills. And these are scores that show word reading of single words, your ability to sound out words, your fluency of words. But yet your reading comprehension, it was over here, this little red dash down at the bottom middle. It was at the fifth percentile. So even with such poor reading skills, you were able to figure out a few things better with your comprehension, your knowledge of words, because we measured your vocabulary, and your vocabulary was at about the 66th percentile. So that means you have reading skills down here at first percentile, and listening, speaking, understanding skills up here at 66th percentile, which is above average. Average is 50th percentile, which would give you more awareness of, frustration, fear, because you could talk, you could communicate, but like you said too, it still interfered sometimes with your speaking skills, your ability to find words. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
more what you remember about that. What was hard about getting your words out to explain things to your sisters or your mom or somebody else, even the teachers?
Well, this is something that I honestly think I don't have it like 100% dominated because I
Hmm.
still get that problem nowadays. I'm sometimes talking and I just can't find the words. I know the words.
Hmm.
I know they're there. They just don't come out. It's really right now. I understand why that is, right? But when I was younger, it was just confusion. It was
Yes.
just I knew things, but I didn't know how to explain them.
Right. And what we know from the science and how we know the brain works, and what other testing we had with you as well, is you had the vocabulary knowledge, but the way the brain accesses vocabulary is by two systems. One is by sound, which is more the left side of the brain. Words that start with b, big, boy, build, bus. B sound words is one way your brain stores words, and it has to also
Hmm.
retrieve words by sound as well. The other way it stores words is by categories. So there's like, animal words, there's Africa animal words, there's ocean animal words, there's plants, there's people, there's buildings, there's vehicles. And so the brain has these two main systems to store words and also to retrieve words. We know one system that you had that was very weak was that phonological or that sound based system. And that's the system that we worked on trying to
Hmm.
change and bring to stronger skills. And I'm looking up at your scores up here in the graph, and those were around the ninth percentile when you were 14 years
Yeah.
old. So the phonological skills still wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And we're able to move most of those skills to between the 50th and 85th percentile. So that phonological system got much, much stronger when you did that Now Foundations program and the blocks and the mouth pictures and building that phonological system. But we also did a measure that's called rapid naming. And rapid naming doesn't ask you to remember new words, it's words you already know. It might be rapid naming for colored squares on a page. And there might just be 6 colors on the page, but there's 50 of these squares using the same 6 colors. It might be a red and a green and another red and then 3 green and a blue and a yellow. And all we ask you to do is go left to right and name all the colored squares as fast as you can. And even with you moving your phonological skills from about the ninth percentile up to around the 60th percentile, you didn't make much change in that what we call rapid automatic retrieval. And here's why. We don't know how the brain does that. We don't really know what is that rapid naming skill coming from. It's part sound based, but it's part something else, and it's also part attention. So it's not surprising that you still might have some word finding problems. But when you did the mental imagery training, and you learn to kind of make a movie in your head and picture things in your head, that would be one other system that should be helping your brain better be able to put words together and better be able to explain words. Talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
well, let me give one other piece of data. We did a test. It's a called the wide range assessment of memory and learning test. And we did a measure of your listening comprehension, your ability to hold on to stories and explain stories back. That was one of your strengths. That's how you were getting through school and life, was you could comprehend at about the 50th percentile. But after you built that phonological system stronger and you built that semantic imagery system stronger, then on that same test, about 10 months later, then your skills are now above the 90th percentile, which means compared to kids your age, and at that time you're about 15 and a half, compared to other 15 and a half year olds, you were in the top 10. And that's compared to 15 and a half year olds, a sample that represents all of them across all of the United States. That's not a small sample. It's a
Hmm.
big sample, which tells us here's a unique thing to think about. Your IQ testing we knew was like around 66th percentile. But we know that if you have any visual motor trouble, if you have any language difficulties, the IQ test is not going to be accurate. And here's another thing about theory and IQ. You can't outperform your IQ. And so for you to go from 50th percentile in listening comprehension to 90th percentile listening comprehension means your IQ cannot be 60th percentile. Because you can't have 90th percentile comprehension if your IQ is only 60th percentile. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah.
So tell me what you know now about, or what do you remember about working on all these systems? I'm telling the audience part about you did phonological work, you did mental imagery work, we did grammar and writing work, you did all 4 programs, even math. And you did a bunch of
Yes.
occupational therapy on visual perception, fine motor skills, visual plus. We were working on all of Santi's brain, building all of these skills together with a whole group of, they're actually brain scientists, Santi. I don't know if you knew that you were working with brain scientists at that time. Speech therapy is one form of brain science. Occupational therapy is another form of brain science. Neuropsychology, different part of brain science. Tell us what you remember about working on and building those skills and cross those different therapies with those different brain science professionals when you're at the Morris Center. What do you remember about doing that, and what did it feel like early on, maybe compared to what you did when you finished?
Maybe I remember a lot, like knowing how that was gonna work for me, right? I remember being a little bit by that time I had been like in a lot of therapy in a lot of places that could help me,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't get any help. It was only, to be honest, my mom was only like paying and paying and paying therapists, and I wasn't getting anywhere.
And how
So
could you tell?
when I got
How
to the
could you
Morris
tell that
Center,
sorry, how could you tell you were not getting better? What did you notice about your skills?
they were the same. They weren't improving.
Yeah.
I was reading at the same pace when I was 14, when I was 7. So
Yeah.
something wasn't right. And so
Understood.
I was getting like a lot of help, right? And nothing was helping me at the end. So when I got to the Morris Center, I was a little bit skeptical. Like I didn't know what was gonna happen. I didn't know how this was gonna help me.
Mhm.
Um, I remember like listening to the like well like all of these mouth images you used to show me and everything, and I was like, I'm not sure how this is gonna help me, right? As time went by, uh, I started getting better. I started being able to read a book. I
Mhm.
started being able to speak more fluently. Uh, and it wasn't something that like well other people were telling me that like you're getting better, right? But I think the most important part is that I knew I was getting better.
Mhm.
Like I every single thing I did was getting better.
Nice.
So and it was a hard time for me, to be honest, when I was in the Morris Center because I was far away from my family. I wasn't in school. I wasn't with my friends. It
Mhm.
was like a tough time for me, but
Yes.
that was keeping me afloat. Like knowing I was getting better was really, really helping me with everything.
Mhm. And that would mean that you could see the books that we were giving you were getting to be bigger, harder, larger words, longer sentences, longer paragraphs, which you will usually have a love hate relationship with. Love that you're
Yes.
getting better, be like, oh gosh, this, the bigger book, like this many words. But then over time, with enough experience of you did it, and then you did it, and then you did it, that's us trying to rebuild what we call your self esteem and your self confidence because they both come from one thing in big ways. They both, in many ways, come from your competence, which means your ability to do something. And if you see that you can't do it, then why would you have good self esteem or self confidence that you can do it? Because you've never seen or felt yourself do it. But as you see yourself reading more and you feel yourself reading more, and then usually what would happen to Santi is when you leave the clinic, you're going to a restaurant, you're going driving down the street, and your brain starts reading the street signs and your brain starts reading menus. And before, typically that would probably not have been what happened for kids who were your age, 14, and had reading skills below the 10th percentile. You would typically not notice words on billboards or not even try them. They go by so fast, or street signs that go by too quickly, or menus. It's too hard. I'm just going to say burger and fries because it's too hard to read the menu. I'm just going to pick something almost every restaurant menu has on it is
Mhm.
hamburger and fries or fish and chips or something like that.
Yeah, I would listen to what like for example, whenever I went to eat with my grandfather, with my mom, I would listen to what they're asking for, and I would ask for the same thing,
And that's
so
called
I wouldn't have to read the menu.
That's called intelligence, Santi. You used your intelligence to figure out a way to work around your reading difficulties. And unfortunately, many adults today never got the experience you got. They've never in their life seen their reading skills get better. They've never seen that they could do it now. And so their view is you can't change these skills. You can't change reading skills. It's hardwired into the brain for dyslexics. And as a published extensively trained neuroimaging published brain science, I can tell you that's absolutely not true. But what could you say to somebody who's 45 who still hasn't gotten reading any easier? Why do you think that hasn't happened?
I think it's mainly because they haven't found the right tools. It's the right help.
Yes.
because once I found the right help, I went from not being able to read a sentence correctly to I remember perfectly. The first book I read in the Morris Center was Moby Dick. That was the first book I read, and I felt pretty proud of myself. It was really nice being able to say I read this by like on my own,
Yes. At
and it
age
was pretty
14,
nice.
people have to
Yeah.
understand this is age 14, you're reading your first book.
Yes.
And you said too, this was a hard time for you, being away from your family, thousands of miles from home. You're in a different city, no friends, no regular play activities. It's just 6 hours a day working on these skills, strengthening these skills. But you also, at the start of that, we knew that you were sad. You'd had a lot of unhappy experiences. So you can call it depression or you can just call it sadness. But we knew you were not a happy kid because life was not that enjoyable. It was a lot of struggles like you said at the beginning, you remember most about your dyslexia being a lot of fear. There was just a lot of fear of school. You could not read. You knew you couldn't spell. What has happened to the fear today? Because now we are, many years later, 11 years later, you're a man in your 20s. And what's happened with your fear about school or about academics? Catch us up. What did you accomplish after you left the Morris Center?
So I finished high school. I currently finished business school.
Fantastic.
And I think I lost a lot of that fear. Also, something I remember you guys taught me is to also try to find tools, right, that could help me. And I got really good at that. I got really, really, really good at that. I'm always trying to find things that can help me. I'm always trying to, and I'm not saying like things that can do the work for me,
Right.
but things that can really, really help me to achieve something.
Right.
So, for example, I know my reading skills are not 100% right now, right?
Mhm.
So I find a tool that can help me do it a little bit better, right? So, for example, in college, whenever I got like, I don't know, I had to read an entire book in a week. I
Mhm.
know probably if I only dedicated my time to that, I could have done it.
Right.
But of course, I have other classes, I have other things to do,
Yeah.
so I knew it wasn't possible. So what I did is I found a tool to make a summary of that book.
Mhm.
And I would read the summary of the book, and then I would be able to do the homework I got.
Mm.
So I I found a lot of good things in like technology has been really helpful for me. Um, and so like my anxiety went away a little bit when after I went to the Morris Center. And for example, in college, I would be able to read really well.
Mhm.
Sometimes, obviously, my head goes to another place, and I would get stuck in some words and stuff. But I would be able to read pretty well, and I would be indistinguishable from other students. I would be able to read the same as them. And knowing like my past, that's really good.
And what about the fear and the anxiety about reading? I mean, normally in college, you're not reading out loud in front of each other. But if did you do any study groups where you got together with your
Yes.
classmates to study? And would you have fear of having to read with your classmates, or is the fear gone?
I would get the fear at first. Like I would think about like my past,
Hmm.
and then I would start reading, and I would like notice I'm not getting stuck. I'm reading pretty fluently, so I would lose that fear. That fear would go away.
Good. So let me put this graph back up on the screen here, Santi, and we can look at it and kind of talk through it. I don't know how well the viewers can see it. It's kind of hard to zoom in, but
Yeah.
the top up here is our memory skills. And you'll see right here in the middle, where the red diamonds are, that's where most of your memory skills, where these are listening memory as well as visual memory skills. And those are right around the 50th percentile. That's what that big gray area in the middle is like, that represents average skills for kids your age. And your Memory skills, some of them stayed right in that area, and that was just recognition. But a lot of your visual and auditory memory skills were markedly stronger, even as high as above the 95th to the 98th percentile on this graph here. So you got really good at listening and comprehending. You came in with strong skills, and we just helped make them stronger with that combination of better auditory memory and better mental imagery. That now mental imagery program works on language, comprehension, memory, and also reasoning skills. So those are just your verbal skills that you're talking about now too. Reading the book summary and probably going to class, we hope. You would learn from the professor as they're speaking, but you'd also get the summary, get a little more background knowledge, and then use your reasoning skills to figure out how to answer questions on the test or how to, display your mastery and knowledge of the information. Down in this second level, this bar here says language. And all of these skills are just listening and speaking language skills. It's not any reading or spelling. And you'll see that all these red diamonds are over here in this white area, and that white area goes from the first percentile on the left to the 9th percentile on the right. So that means most all of your listening and speaking language skills are below the 10th percentile. After changing your phonological skills, that now foundations program, and your mental imagery skills, that now mental imagery program, then you see these little icons here. These are actually all logos from the Now company. All now show that most of your skills are now at 50th percentile or above. And so you're listening to understand what people are saying, your ability to put words together and begin to get words out expressively. We're becoming much, much stronger. And most importantly, your phonological skills. Your ability to hold a word in memory, split it apart, judge if you've changed things, and self-correct speaking errors or self-correct reading errors or beginning to self-correct spelling errors. Those skills are going to be much stronger because your phonological skills are stronger. The bottom down here, now these are all the written language skills where it says reading. And these reading skills are different aspects of reading sight words, reading nonsense words, reading words quickly. And then the last two are actually reading plus comprehension. And again, a lot of the skills are down here below the 2nd percentile because at age 14, you still had not successfully learned how to sound out words and had not successfully learned how to read. And we brought those skills up to about the 10th and then into the 25th percentile for how well you could actually sound out words. But your reading comprehension had moved all the way up to the 50th percentile. So it means with the vocabulary knowledge you had and the imagery knowledge you had just from your speaking language skills, now that you can sound out words better, you begin to remember and understand more while you're reading. But notice one big important piece, this bottom icon here on reading comprehension compared to this top one on the top right where your listening comprehension skills are.
Mm-hmm.
Santi, there's only one difference between reading comprehension and listening comprehension. It's reading.
Yeah.
And so that told us the skill that was interfering with your reading comprehension was not your comprehension skills. It was your reading skills. So we made big gains there. And then as you keep using them and keep building them over the last 11 years since you left Morris Center, these skills should keep getting stronger and stronger as you keep building them and using them over time. How does that feel for you? Does that seem accurate, or do you think it's about the same?
No, I think I've gotten a lot better at reading comprehension. I think, because I really remember reading something and not understanding absolutely anything.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I can pretty much read an entire book and I'll understand, I don't know, maybe 80% of it.
Yes.
If I read it a second time, I'll understand 100% of it.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
And at the bottom of this graph are writing skills. We asked you to write a paragraph, write an essay, basically. Write a quick essay in 15 minutes. It's timed, too. You're under pressure. And before, it was at the 1st percentile. And after those, you actually, I don't know if you know this, it was about 300 hours of intervention you did at the Morris Center across all the months. Now, let's be frank, your family took a lot of trips in between times. You'd be there for a month and take a trip and then come back for a month and take a trip. And that's a lovely worldly experience. So it took 300 hours. It took us about 8 months or so to get through the 300 hours. And you went from the 1st percentile in your ability to write a paragraph to the 25th percentile, which is right at the beginning of the average on grade level range of writing skills. And then you took those skills and now you've gotten through high school, you've gotten through business school, and depends on how much your job requires writing. What's your view about your writing skills today?
I think my writing skills, they're much better than when I was 14,
Yeah.
but I sometimes struggle a little bit on that still.
Yes.
Uh, Also, I've learned to use a lot of tools for that.
Mhm.
But for example, since I don't write so much in English
Right.
as I did before,
Yes.
that's like a problem I'm having, right? So
Yes.
I need to practice more my writing in English because my writing in Spanish is pretty good.
Excellent.
I've gotten a lot better in Spanish, but I would say in English I've gotten better, but
Mhm.
I'm kind of stuck in a place.
Which is understandable when the bulk of your world today is in Spanish, which means
Exactly.
your brain is getting more practice with, and I'll be speaking very literally here. It's getting more practice with the Spanish wiring more so than the English wiring. And here's why I say Spanish wiring versus English wiring. I spent 10 years doing stroke rehab, which means adults had a brain injury where one of the arteries got clogged or it's through a clot to part of the artery. The blood supply got cut off to part of the brain on the left side. Part of the brain tissue dies, and they lose reading skills or they lose spelling skills or lose writing skills due to this brain injury, brain damage. Now, we don't call that dyslexia because it's not genetic. We call it alexia, which it's acquired. And we showed that using the same treatment program that we used with you to rebuild your phonological skills, strengthen your phonological awareness, improve your decoding, the ability to sound out words when reading, sound out words when spelling. We gave that same program to these adults who had the brain injury, and we were able to rebuild their skills. But there's a unique situation that happens when the person who has the brain injury is bilingual. Here's the interesting phenomenon, Santi. Sometimes one language after the stroke is markedly better than the other language. So one language is still high and the other language is still low. And it's not always the first language that's strong. Sometimes
Hmm.
the first language is weak and the second language is strong. Sometimes both languages are impaired, and sometimes the first language is strong and the second language is weak. So the question that we began to be asked was, okay, well, how do you rebuild the wiring? But now the reason why I said English wiring and Spanish wiring is we know if a stroke affects only one language and not the other, there must be different wiring. And we had more damage on the wiring that's weak, left you with the weaker skills like in English, and less damage to the wiring that kept Spanish stronger.
Hmm.
So the more you use those skills, the more you practice them, the more you do writing in English, the stronger they'll get. And
Yeah.
likewise, the more you write in Spanish, the stronger those skills will get. But you have a unique situation in that the psychologist in Mexico tested you before you came to Morris Center, and she only tested you in Spanish.
Yes.
Spanish reading, Spanish spelling, ability to sound out words in Spanish, ability to do phonological activities with Spanish words, like add a sound or take away a sound, these things that we call phonological awareness. And the testing she had matched all the testing we had in that same set of skills when we tested you in English. So when you went back to Mexico, we asked her to repeat the testing. And she repeated all the Spanish testing. And I don't have a graph for this one, Santi, but interesting piece is the gains that you've made on this graph here in your English skills, you made almost the same amount of gain in Spanish. And how many lessons did we do in Spanish when you were at Morris Center, Santi?
Zero.
Yeah. We had nobody at the clinic who spoke
Yeah.
Spanish, or muy poquito, yeah. And so the unique piece was we strengthened your language processor. And that means your ability to perceive sounds of any language, your ability to hold on to words from any language, your ability to split them apart, put them together, and begin to get your mouth to say them properly. We worked on that language processor, not just on English. And
Hmm.
your data helps prove that resoundingly because you did the same testing with the same psychologist a year later. And all we'd done in between time was done all this work with Morris Center because you had not been in school, you'd been at Morris Center. or family trips. But we had worked on building these skills and rewiring these skills. And I jokingly say family trips because before you got started, your grandfather came to meet with me and he wanted to know face to face, was I telling the truth? Was I really going to be able to help you change the skills? And I didn't know to say to him, yes, but not if you take a whole lot of family trips. So, but he trusted us. He brought you to the clinic. And lucky for us, lucky for me, lucky for him, we had a mutual friend who was a doctor there in Mexico.
Yes.
And he trusted that doctor. And I had gone to graduate school with that same doctor. He's probably the only person in Mexico City who knew me and knew all the work I'd done in dyslexia. So that was just a very fortuitous or divine meeting between your father and Dr. Riestra.
Hmm.
And that helped us have enough assurance that your grandfather believed that maybe that we actually know what we're talking about because we're not a school. We're not, educators who are trained in delivering curriculums. We're brain scientists who understand how the brain processes information. So on the test scores, I'll give you an example. On the Spanish, you went from about the let's see, about the 30th percentile on your ability to sound out words to about the 55th percentile. And those are sounding out Spanish words. And we didn't do any work in Spanish. But because we changed your language processing and changed your ability to sound out English words, you took those skills on your own and just began doing it with Spanish. Much like if you had just started to learn Spanish at age 26, you would use those same skills now. If you were just now learning Spanish, you would use your English phonology skills to try to learn Spanish phonology. But because now the brain's processors are working well, they're working efficiently, we'd call it. Some of the other skills that you changed was your phonological awareness in Spanish was right around the fifth percentile. And when we finished the intervention, and again, we only did intervention in English, your phonological awareness in Spanish was now at about the 40th percentile.
Hmm.
So you went from the fifth percentile, which is very difficult. You're really struggling. The 40th percentile, which is like on grade level. You're right there in the average range, able to phonologically change and manipulate words in Spanish.
Yes.
But do you remember things changing for you in Spanish, how that was different? Or did it just happen seamlessly for you?
It kind of happened seamlessly because when I got to Mexico and I started school again and everything, I suddenly wasn't that shy to do a lot of things. I was being able to do a lot of the work they were leaving me. Um, I got a lot better at school, and that really was like a confidence boost. So like pretty much that was when I noticed it helped me in both languages, right? When I got to Mexico again, because when I was in Ocala, I pretty much didn't do anything in Spanish. Not even like the only thing I did in Spanish was talk to my mom and talk to my family back in Mexico in Spanish, but I didn't read or write in Spanish.
Yeah.
Everything I did was in English. And not only in a clinic, like when I was in my room, when I was wherever I wasn't reading or writing in Spanish. So you could say I was out of practice for 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to Mexico, it was a really good surprise that I could read, I could write better. It was truly a really, really good surprise.
Fantastic. And we have a viewer, Marty, who is Colombian, who says that she learned English better than Spanish, but she then really didn't want to write in Spanish, and because of beliefs, she wanted to abandon that and become independent and do more in English. But decades later, she wrote her first libro, and now she's a bilingual international award-winning author. So she's saying kudos to you, Santi, for taking the challenges and succeeding.
Thank
So
you.
it's understandable and nice to see that the viewers really understand and appreciate how hard it is to be bilingual and dyslexic in both languages. How much that beats down your self-esteem and how you have to be resilient. But it also means, I told you there's one main thing that changed self-esteem, but there's another one that you have exponentially powerful for you, and that is family support. Your family knew you were intelligent. They knew that you were not low IQ. They knew that you had the ability to do more and you should be able to learn to read. That's why they never stopped looking for a therapy. Now, granted, you went through a lot of therapies before you came by us. So that makes it very frustrating because you begin to think, many kids tell me, I begin to think that it's my brain that's the problem. And interestingly, you were at the clinic at the same time a student from Venezuela was there, Carlota
Yes,
Amelia.
yes.
And Carlota Amelia says, and we've had a similar video chat. We've not done a dyslexia success story yet on Carlota Amelia, but she, in a video conversation with me, she said, I sat down with you in that room and you started showing me those mouth pictures. And I thought, okay, here's another program that thinks they're going to help me and is going to fail. Can you relate to that?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
after so many people trying to help you, you kind of lose hope,
yes,
and you lose, and at a young age, you lose hope faster. You get more frustrated. You get, I don't know, like you lose a lot.
yes. And at age 14, when you first came to Morris Center, did you think you'd graduate from high school and go to college and success in college?
No,
Why not?
no, I honestly didn't think I would be able to do it. I honestly thought I would have to just finish high school and see what else I had to do, right?
Hmm.
But I never really thought I could finish, like, well, achieve all I've achieved up till now.
And what's fantastic about your story is you've shown that when we rewire the language processor, it affects more than one language. That means if you, it's going to sound crazy, but if you decide you want to learn German, guess what? Could you do it?
Yeah, and funny enough, I've been trying to learn Portuguese for about 4 months now,
Hmm.
and I'm getting really good at it. I'm starting to read, and I'm starting to write, and I'm starting to speak it. And I've tried to use a lot of the same tools you gave me to learn a new language.
Hmm. Which basically just means you're sounding it out. You're trying to learn
Yes.
the letter sound combinations. You're trying to make sure your mouth is making the right sounds when you put it together. And you're using that language processor that the Morris Center and the Now programs helped you empower closer to your IQ level. Because that's the real goal. The goal is not just to get them a little bit stronger. The goal is no, get them to your IQ level because Santi, we know that your brain is going to be what we call a Ferrari brain. It's got to be like top 10% in brain power because when you left Moore Center in age 15 and a half, you had already brought some of your memory skills up to the 90th percentile. And I want you to really understand that. You have a very powerful brain. And as you keep building these skills, they keep getting closer and closer to that Ferrari potential. And you get to thank your mom and dad for the Ferrari brain because it's genetic. But you get to blame your mom and dad for the reading difficulties because it's genetic. And he's not going to like that I say this, but they get to blame grandpa and grandma because it's genetic.
Yeah.
But the point is, yeah, when you're struggling, when you're frustrated, and what our viewer Marty says is, yeah, it causes delusions when you're younger, when you struggle so much and you don't see yourself getting read. And again, you're already 14. That you are even willing to try another program is very powerful example of the love and support you had from your family that you felt okay if my family wants to do this I can give it a try
Yeah.
and you came in and gave us good motivation good effort even though you probably only had this much belief that it's really going to work or maybe even this much at the beginning and then the belief starts to grow as the success of the skills start to change. That's why we say competence changes confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah,
So let's
and another thing I remember a lot from before I went to the Moore Center is my life was pretty stressful in the sense that I would go to school very early, and I would pretty much arrive at my house, I don't know, 9, 10, because from like 6 a.m. to 9, I was in school therapy, math therapy, I was in all kinds of things. that weren't really helping me.
Yeah.
So I went from everything. And the way I found the Morris Center was I used to go with an occupational therapist.
Hmm.
Her name is Marlene, and she went to your TED Talk.
Yeah.
And when she got back to Mexico, she was talking to me and she was like, "Oh, I went to a TED Talk with this guy named Tim, and I think you would really, really improve if you go to his clinic."
Hmm.
So that's when my mom and everyone started to think, well, why don't we try this last thing, right?
Right.
Let's try this last resource.
Right. Because Marlene was a occupational therapist. That's another
Yes.
brain science profession. She understands how to change the brain wiring for fine motor skills, visual perceptual skills, visual plus motor skills, coordination, regulation. They call it interoception, proprioception, vestibular. There's all these terminology that's very specific to OTs.
Yeah.
And yes, it was part of my TED Talk was I spoke at a big conference for occupational therapists, and she was also at that conference and heard me share all the data, all the research that we had done. We're the only clinic in the US, UK, Canada, pretty much globally that's done $3 million randomized control trial research studies on the method that you got. What that means to most people, Santi, is this is the same caliber of science that built penicillin, that made it the most powerful antibiotic for strep throat. And even though penicillin's research is more than 60 years old, they've not stopped using penicillin for one reason. There's no new research that shows another antibiotic that's more effective than penicillin for strep throat as long as you're not allergic to it. But there are studies that show there are better antibiotics for ear infections. So guess what happens? When the science shows something more successful in healthcare, they stop using the less successful and go to the one that's been proven to be more successful. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in education. In education, it's all about what's the popular thing. It's all about, who's the popular speaker. It's all about, what program do people hear about that might be working. It's not about the research and the science as much. We're getting closer, but most of education today is still based on philosophy and ideology, which means what I think and what I feel is all that matters, which means a lot of the programs that are out there are well intentioned, very dedicated people who want to help people learn to read better. And they get excited when they see a little progress, but a little progress is not the same as closing the gaps. What you did was you closed the gaps in their phonological skills. They're markedly higher, going from like a scale score of 60 to like a scale score of 105. Standard score of 60 to a standard score of 105, which means you're smack dab in the average range. And today it's probably even stronger because you've kept using those skills. You've kept building those skills. So I think it's helpful to help the audience here that here's a young man now who was 15 when he came to Morris Center, 14 and a half actually, left at 15, and came in reading with skills in about the first percentile. And now feels confident that got his high school diploma, got a college business degree, and who knows what you're going to do next. Is it going to be business or is it going to be something else?
Well, right now I am building my own business. I've been, I don't know, maybe about 5 months trying to build my own business, and I'm starting to go up right now.
Excellent.
It's been hard, but I think I'll be successful.
Fantastic. And we know that you have the one main ingredient for business success, Santi, which is perseverance.
Yes.
It's you just keep trying, you keep pushing, you keep working. And then your other main ingredient that you have is reasoning skills, problem solving skills. And this is a unique thing about adults with dyslexia is there's a group that wants to say that every adult with dyslexia has these 5 skills and they're better out of the box thinkers, or they're better with interpersonal communication, or they're better with reasoning, problem solving skills. And that's actually not true. Every adult with dyslexia does not have those 5 skills. There's no study that supports that myth. It's wishful thinking.
Mhm.
But every human brain has that potential. And whether you're dyslexic or not, you can learn how to use mental imagery. And whether you're dyslexic or not, you can learn how to use more creative problem solving skills by language skills, by motor skills, by intuition, by all kinds of ways of using the brain to think and reason. And in neuropsychology, we know that the brain has all these potentials, but it only builds them by one way. It's called experience dependent plasticity. That means if you couldn't read and you never learned to read, you still might be successful in business if you got really good at making movies in your head and build your mental imagery skills because you practiced that skill all day long. You built that skill. You weren't genetically endowed with it from birth, but you actually practiced it and built it. And you could still be successful in business. Richard Branson is one of the most popular, most famous examples of that. But just a question that many adults who have dyslexia, who then come to the online nowprograms.com, and whether you're 50, 60, or 70, we can still strengthen the reading skills, and they do. Many of those adults say to us, okay, yeah, I am successful in business, and I've accomplished as much, but how much more could I have accomplished if I didn't struggle with reading, and if I didn't have to do all these workaround skills, and do all these, other apps and books on tape and things that take more time, I probably could have accomplished more. And we're like, we'll never know. But the good news is you now have the skills and you now got control of the accomplishments. So I think that's exactly where you're at. Does that sound true?
Yeah. Yeah, I think something I was just thinking about right now is like once you stop fighting that dyslexia brain, you can really use it in your favor. It really becomes like a super brain, like you were saying. It becomes really a super brain. I find it really funny because sometimes I normally leave everything at at the end, right? Whenever I had to do a homework, and if they left it for me a week ago, I would do it one day before. But the funny thing is that my brain works in a certain way that I would be able to finish a week's worth of work in one single day, in one single sitting.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be just doing it it wouldn't be bad work. It would be really good work.
Right.
Because I work really good under pressure. That's when I know I have a deadline and I know I'm starting that deadline 24 hours before.
The clock is ticking.
Exactly. My brain enters like a super mode. And
focused.
I start working really fast and I can be focused for 8 hours in a row. I can not drink water, not eat, not anything, but my brain is focused and I won't get out of that focus. Sometimes I don't know how to control that. I don't know how to get into that zone. But whenever I do, I really love my brain. I think it's amazing. And that's kind of when I thought, well, I have to stop fighting it and just let it go.
Yep. And one of our viewers, again, Marty, we appreciate your comment. She says, while you are both blessed and a definite blessing to others, we appreciate your support and your kind words. And I think, Santi, you've helped us exemplify to the audience that one, dyslexia is not a life sentence. We can change the skills. We can make the reading skills stronger, spelling skills stronger, comprehension stronger. The brain has amazing potential for change. It's literally 100 billion brain cells with about 100 trillion connections. But to make the connections stronger and better takes very explicit, what we call evidence-based practice. And that means the method you're using has been scientifically tested and proven to be highly effective. And both the MorrisCenter.com and NowPrograms.com, those companies are very skilled, very expertise level providers of those kinds of programs. And let me give one more set of numbers to you, Santi. So on your ability to judge words in Spanish, you went from a standard score of 57 to 86. That's 20 percentile points higher, and we didn't do any work in Spanish. On your ability to sound out Spanish words, you went from a standard score of 91 to 105. And that's like a full standard deviation of gain. It's like several grade levels. And we didn't do any reading in Spanish during the instructional treatment. And here's the most one that's going to blow most people's minds. We also measured your ability just to read Spanish words that are kind of words you just memorize. You don't really sound them out that much. And in the beginning, you scored 78. And 78 is right around the 5th percentile. At the end, you scored 100. That is the 50th percentile. You made 45 percentile point gain. That's like multiple grade levels of improvement in just your memory of Spanish words. And we didn't work on that. But because OT changed your visual perception, visual memory skills, and the language team changed your language processing skills, these things all now came together. And even your Spanish skills in terms of Spanish reading comprehension went up also almost a whole standard deviation. That's like from an 80, which is going to be down around the 9th percentile, up to a 95, which is going to put you right around the 37th to 40th percentile. And so that shows that we know the brain's got the capacity if it has the right programs, the right intensity, with the right frequency. And that's what we want to see happen for many, many more children, college students, high school kids, young adults. Our oldest person online, Santi, take a guess. How old would you be and you're still willing to change your reading skills? What do you think?
I think there's no age limit. I don't know. Maybe if I would have found you when I was, I don't know, 60 or 70, I would have tried it.
Well, and our
To be
oldest
honest.
man online so far, he was 74. And at age 74, he had not gotten the opportunity you got at age 14. He still didn't read very well. He'd been successful in business, but he's like, I still want to change these skills. And so we said, okay. And so he went to nowprograms.com. We scheduled an interview with him. We explained what we're going to do. We set him up and the lesson started and he rebuilt the skills. He strengthened them markedly. And then it doesn't stop. And Marty's saying, and you could even be 90. And she's absolutely right, because there's only one criteria or one point in which we can't change your reading skills. And that's just death. That's it. The rest is open to be empowered and built. So Santi, I really appreciate your time with this dyslexia success story of your life. Really appreciate you helping us share it with our viewers. This gets pushed out on multiple channels. We do more viewership after the live show. We're not really big on trying to do a whole bunch of live participation, but we do more on the post recording. And so we appreciate your time. Any last parting words for anybody who still thinks this might be that you got the program you needed, as opposed to what I'm telling you as a brain scientist? We know this program helps most anybody who has dyslexia. This program is going to be successful because we did all the research to prove it's successful, just like they did all the research to prove penicillin helps strep throat. Your last closing words, what would you say?
I think my last words would be that it's never like too late to start to help yourself and help yourself improve. And also, I think every brain is different.
Mm-hmm.
Every brain has its own way of learning. Every brain has its own way of cheating sometimes. Sometimes your brain tries to cheat itself. But I think with some programs like this one, your brain can really rewire itself and really improve. I'm saying this out of experience. I'm saying this out of something that really happened to me. So I think it's possible, and it is possible.
Fantastic, Santi. And we agree with Marty. It's magnifico. And we'll sign off now, and we'll see folks in 2 weeks for another dyslexia success story. And hopefully I'm not fumbling my words that time. I'm just getting a little tongue-tied this morning. That's my dyslexia, comes through sometimes as well. But again, Santi, thanks for your time. And viewers, thanks for joining us. And we look forward to another show in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.